The distress beacon should have been singing by now, but all Captain Zara Voss could hear was the wheeze of dying life support and her own increasingly creative vocabulary. She slammed her fist against the console, which responded with a shower of sparks and what sounded suspiciously like electronic laughter. "Fantastic," she muttered, watching her ship's systems fail in real time. 20 years salvaging derelicts in the outer rim, and I go down like a rookie on a milk run. The nebula around her pulsed with colors that had no names, at least none, that appeared in any star chart she'd memorized. Her long-range sensors had been screaming warnings about gravitational anomalies for the past hour, but Zara had ignored them. Credits didn't earn themselves, and that abandoned mining platform wasn't going to strip itself. Now she was paying for her stubbornness. The Iron Sparrow groaned around her, hull plates buckling under forces that physics textbooks claimed were impossible. Through the viewport, space itself seemed to twist, bending light into impossible spirals that made her eyes water. "Come on, old girl," she whispered to her ship, fingers dancing across backup controls. "Don't do this to me now." But the Iron Sparrow had other ideas. With a final, almost apologetic shudder, the engines cut out completely. Emergency power kicked in, bathing the cockpit in hellish red light, and then even that began to fade. Sarah's hands moved on autopilot, 20 years of experience taking over where panic threatened to freeze her. Emergency beacon, check. Survival kit, check. Last will and testament updated 3 months ago when she'd nearly been caught in that. Solar flare near Proxima, check. The escape pod ejected with a violent jolt that rattled her teeth. Through the tiny porthole, she watched the Iron Sparrow disappear into the nebula's hungry embrace, its hull dissolving like sugar in rain. Then the pod's heat shields activated, and everything went white. Consciousness returned slowly, accompanied by the mother of all headaches and the distinct taste of alien pollen. Zara groaned and tried to sit up, immediately regretting the decision as the world spun like a broken carousel. She was lying in what looked like a meadow, if meadows were made of crystalline grass that chimed softly in the breeze. The sky above was a deep amber shot through with veins of silver, and 2 suns hung overhead like mismatched eyes. The air tasted of ozone and something sweet she couldn't identify. "Well," she said to no one in particular, "this is new." Her escape pod was nowhere to be seen, probably absorbed by whatever strange matter composed this world's surface. Her survival kit had made the journey, though, scattered around her in a rough circle like offerings to some benevolent god of cosmic bad luck. Zara gathered her supplies methodically, taking inventory. Water purification tablets, emergency rations, medical kit, signal flare, and her grandfather's old pistol that had never failed her yet. Not much to survive on an alien world, but she'd made do with less. That's when she heard the voice. "You always were terrible at landings." Zara spun around, weapon drawn, and found herself staring at nothing. The crystalline meadow stretched empty in all directions, broken only by strange trees that grew in perfect spirals toward the amber sky. "Who's there?" she called out, voice steady despite her racing heart. "Show yourself." Laughter rippled through the air, warm and familiar in a way that made her chest tight. "You used to be braver than this, little star." The nickname hit her like a physical blow. Nobody had called her that since she was 7 years old and talking to shadows in her bedroom closet. Since before her parents had dragged her to child psychologists and put her on medications that made the world gray and flat. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Is it?" The air shimmered, and suddenly she wasn't alone anymore. The figure that materialized was tall and willowy, with skin like polished obsidian and hair that moved like liquid starlight. Their features were androgynous and beautiful in a way that hurt to look at directly, and their eyes held depths that spoke of centuries and sorrows. But it was the smile that broke her. That gentle, knowing smile she remembered from childhood nightmares when monsters lived under her bed and only one voice could chase them away. "Hello, Zara," the figure said. "I've missed you." Zara's gun wavered in her grip. "Nix? You remember." Their smile widened, revealing teeth like polished pearls. I wasn't sure you would. It's been so long since you stopped listening. The gun dropped from Zara's numb fingers. Memories flooded back, 25 years of careful repression crumbling like a dam under pressure. Nyx, her shadow friend, her secret companion who lived in the spaces between light and dark, who had whispered stories of distant worlds and impossible things until the doctors made it stop. "You're not real," she said. But even as the words left her mouth, she knew they were lies. You were never real. Just childhood trauma and an overactive imagination. Nyx stepped closer, their feet making no sound on the crystal grass. Trauma? Is that what they called it? Their voice was soft, but Zara caught the edge of pain beneath. When you saw past the veil, when you heard the songs between the stars? The medications helped, Zara said weakly. The medications silenced. You. Nyx's form flickered, becoming translucent for a moment before solidifying again. They cut the threads that connected you to wonder, to magic, to me. But they couldn't cut them completely. Otherwise, you never would have ended up here. Zara looked around at the impossible landscape, at the amber sky and singing grass and the figure from her deepest memories. Where is here exactly? The threshold, Nyx said simply. The place between what is and what could be. Your ship didn't malfunction, little star. It was called here, by the part of you that never stopped believing. That's insane. Is it more insane than spending your life scavenging dead ships in the void? More insane than choosing the emptiness between stars over the warmth of human connection? Nyx's eyes held no judgment, only sadness. You've been running from yourself for decades, Zara. Running from the girl who used to dance with shadows and dream of impossible things. Zara sank to her knees, overwhelmed. The crystal grass beneath her was warm, pulsing gently like a living thing. Why now? Why bring me here after all these years? Nyx knelt beside her, close enough that Zara could feel the strange coolness of their presence. Because you're dying inside. Oh, your body still functions, your mind still calculates profit margins and salvage rights. But your soul, the part that made you special, that made you mine, it's withering away. I'm not yours, Zara said automatically. Aren't you? Nyx reached out, their fingers hovering just above Zara's cheek. You never married, never formed lasting connections. You chose the loneliness of space because it felt familiar. Like the empty places where I used to live in your heart. The touch, when it came, was electric. Not painful, but intense in a way that made every nerve ending sing. Memories crashed over her in waves, nights spent whispering to the darkness, games played with shadows that moved independently, stories told in languages that existed only in the spaces between thoughts. The doctors said it was unhealthy, Zara whispered. The doctors were afraid, Nyx replied. Afraid of children who could see beyond their narrow understanding of reality. They called it delusion because acknowledging it would have meant admitting their world was smaller than they thought. Zara pulled back, breaking the contact. So what happens now? You drag me off to some fairy tale realm, and we live happily, ever after? Nyx laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Nothing so simple. You have a choice to make, little star. You always did. They stood, offering Zara their hand. Come. Let me show you what you gave up and what you might still reclaim. Zara stared at the offered hand, at the being who had been her closest companion before the world taught her to be ashamed of impossible things. Part of her wanted to refuse, to cling to the safe, predictable emptiness of her adult life. But a larger part, the part that had been sleeping for 25 years, was already reaching out. The moment their fingers touched, the world exploded, into color and music and sensation beyond description. The crystalline meadow fell away, replaced by vistas that belonged in dreams and poetry. Zara gasped, overwhelmed by the beauty of it, by the rightness of Nyx's hand in hers. Welcome home, Nyx whispered, and for the first time in decades, Zara felt like she truly was. The transition felt like diving through liquid starlight. Zara's consciousness scattered and reformed, her sense of self dissolving into something larger before snapping back into focus. When the world solidified around her, she found herself standing in a place that defied every law of physics she'd ever learned. They were in a vast garden that stretched beyond the horizon, but the horizon curved upward instead of away, creating a sphere of impossible geography. Overhead, instead of sky, she saw more garden, its crystalline flowers hanging like inverted chandeliers. Gravity seemed to be more of a suggestion here, as streams of luminescent water flowed upward in spirals, feeding floating islands of vegetation that drifted lazily through the air. "This is where we live," Nick said, their voice carrying harmonics that resonated in Zara's bones. "The forgotten ones, the abandoned dreams, the imaginary friends who were never quite as imaginary as your world believed." Zara turned slowly, taking in the impossible vista. Everywhere she looked, she saw figures that seemed half real, shimmering between states of existence. Some were clearly non-human, beings of light and shadow and stranger things. Others looked human but moved with an otherworldly grace that marked them as something more. "How many?" she asked. "Thousands. Millions. Every child who ever whispered to the darkness and heard something whisper back. Every young mind that reached beyond the veil before being taught that such reaching was madness." Nix's expression grew sad again. "Most forget. Us completely. A few remember but dismiss us as childhood fantasies. Very few," they touched Zara's hand gently. "Very few find their way back." A figure approached them across the crystal grass, and Zara's breath caught. It was a woman, tall and elegant, with silver hair that moved like liquid mercury and eyes the color of deep space. She wore robes that seemed to be cut from the fabric of nebulae, shifting purple and gold with each step. "This is Thessaly," Nick said. She was companion to a boy named Marcus, who grew up to become your species' most celebrated physicist. He still dreams of her sometimes, though he calls them nightmares now. Thessaly smiled, an expression both beautiful and heartbreaking. Marcus built machines to peer into the quantum realm, searching for something he couldn't name. He never realized. He was looking for me. She gestured toward a distant grove where mathematical equations hung from trees like fruit. His work touches the edge of our reality. Sometimes I whisper corrections to his calculations while he sleeps. "That's impossible," Zara said automatically, then caught herself. "Sorry, I keep saying that. Your scientists are closer to the truth than they know," Thessaly said kindly. "Consciousness shapes reality more than matter. Children understand this instinctively, before education teaches them otherwise. That's why we can reach them so easily." They walked deeper into the garden, past groves where other beings tended to growing dreams and streams where liquid music flowed like water. Each inhabitant Nix introduced had a similar story, a human child who had grown up and away from wonder, leaving their companion stranded in this beautiful exile. "There's Joran," Nix pointed to a figure made of shifting aurora lights, whose boy became a famous artist, but stopped painting the colors that don't exist, and Wild there, whose girl became a poet but only writes about pain now, never joy. Zara noticed that some areas of the garden were darker, where flowers had withered and trees stood bare. "What happened there?" Nix's expression grew pained. "Those are the places where our humans died. Not just physically, though that happens too, but when they die inside, when the last spark of wonder is extinguished, we fade as well. We're connected, you see. We exist because they once believed we could. They came to a small clearing where a fountain bubbled with liquid light. Around its edge sat figures that seemed more faded than the others, their forms wavering like heat mirages. The dying places," Nix explained quietly. "Companions whose humans are close to giving up entirely. We come here to say goodbye." One of the fading figures looked up at their approach. It was a creature that might once have been magnificent, with rainbow wings and a mane of living fire, but now appeared dim and translucent. "Pyrion," Nix greeted gently. "How is she today?" "The same," the creature replied, its voice barely audible. "She sits in her gray apartment staring at gray walls, eating gray food. She works at her gray job and comes home to her gray life. She doesn't remember flying with me through painted clouds when she was 7, She doesn't remember believing in magic. Zara felt something twist in her chest. Can't you reach her? Remind her. Pyrion's laugh was like the whisper of ash. I try. I visit her dreams, leave signs in her waking world, but she's built walls around her heart so thick that nothing can penetrate. She calls it being realistic. I call it dying by degrees. They left the fountain and its sad guardians, but the encounter stayed with Zara. She found herself thinking about her own life, the sterile efficiency of her ship, the empty interactions with clients and competitors. When had she last felt joy? When had she last created something instead of just salvaging the creations of others? You're thinking, Nyx observed. Dangerous habit, Zara muttered. Nyx, what happened to us? Why did I stop seeing you? Nyx was quiet for a long moment, leading her toward what looked like a library made of crystallized thoughts. You were 8 when they first told you I wasn't real. Your parents were worried because you spent more time talking to me than to other children. They meant well, Zara remembered, the concerned whispers, the doctor visits, the pills that made everything feel muffled and distant. The medication. That was the beginning. But the real damage came later, when you internalized their fear. When you started believing that imagination was childish, that wonder was weakness, that the safe gray world was better than the dangerous colorful one. They entered the library where books floated freely in the air, their pages turning of their own accord. Each one, Zara realized, contained the dreams and stories of a human child, preserved here long after the child had forgotten them. Look, Nyx said, gesturing to a book that glowed brighter than the others. As it drifted closer, Zara could see her own younger face on its cover, gap-toothed and grinning. Your story. Would you like to read what you've forgotten? Zara reached for the book with trembling hands. The moment she touched it, memories flooded back with painful intensity. Herself at 5, building impossible cities with blocks that Nyx helped her stack beyond the reach of gravity. At 6, having tea parties where the cups floated and the table was made of solidified moonbeams. At 7, flying through her bedroom on Nyx's back while her parents thought she was asleep. We were going to explore the galaxy together, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. You promised to show me worlds made of music and cities built from crystallized laughter. We still can, Nyx said softly. If you choose to. Zara looked up from the book. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said in the meadow. You have a choice, little star. You can return to your old life, to your ship and your salvage runs and your comfortable emptiness. The experience will fade like a strange dream, and you'll go back to slowly dying inside. Or you can stay. Not forever, but long enough to remember who you used to be, to reconnect with the part of yourself that danced with shadows and dreamed impossible dreams. Then you can return to your world, but you'll take that part of yourself with you. Zara set the book down carefully. And if I stay, what happens to my life? My business? Nyx smiled. That same gentle expression she remembered from childhood. Time moves differently here. What feels like months to you will be moments in your world. When you return, your distress beacon will have just started broadcasting. Rescue will come, and you'll continue your life. But you'll be whole again. There's a catch, isn't there? There's always a catch. The catch is that once you remember, you can't forget again. You'll see the gray world for what it is, the prison your species has built around wonder. You'll feel the sadness of it every day. Some humans find that burden too heavy to bear. Zara thought of Pyrion and their fading companion, of all the beings in this garden whose humans had chosen safety over magic. Then she thought of her own life, 20 years of drifting through space like a ghost, scavenging the remains of others' dreams while creating nothing of her own. How long do I have to decide? As long as you need. But choose carefully, little star, this opportunity doesn't come twice. Zara nodded and walked away from Nyx, needing space to think. She found herself at the edge of a cliff that looked out over impossible vistas. where floating islands drifted past like lazy whales and rivers of light connected distant mountains. In the distance, she could see other gardens, other refuges where forgotten companions waited for their humans to remember. It was beautiful beyond words, but it was also achingly sad. A paradise populated by the abandoned, a heaven built from humanity's discarded dreams. She thought about her grandfather, the man who had given her his old pistol and stories of adventure among the stars. He died when she was 12, shortly after the medications began. Had he ever had a companion like Nyx? Had he been forced to choose between wonder and respectability? The answer, she realized, was in the stars themselves. Her grandfather had named her little star not because of astronomy, but because he'd seen something in her that sparkled, something the world had tried very hard to extinguish. When she returned to Nyx, her decision was clear. "I want to remember," she said simply. "All of it, even if it hurts." Nyx's smile could have powered a sun. "Then let's begin your real education. Little star, let's teach you to fly again." They spent what felt like months in that impossible garden. Though Zara knew it was only moments in the real world, Nyx taught her to see beyond the veil, to perceive the threads of possibility that connected all things. She learned to touch the dreams of sleeping minds, to whisper comfort to the lost, to dance with the fundamental forces that shaped reality. More importantly, she remembered joy. Pure, uncomplicated delight in existence, in the simple fact of being conscious in a universe full of wonders. She remembered what it felt like to create instead of merely consume, to build instead of salvage. When it came time to leave, she was ready. "Will I see you again?" she asked as the garden began to fade around them. "Every time you look at the stars and remember that some of them are dreams come true," Nyx replied. "Every time you choose wonder over safety, magic over mundane, I'll be there. Promise?" "Promise, little star." Zara opened her eyes to the amber sky of the crystalline world, her distress beacon finally beginning to broadcast. In the distance, she could see the lights of a rescue ship beginning its approach. But now she could see other things too, the songs the crystal grass sang, the dreams that danced in the amber light, the thin places where wonder leaked through into the physical world. She was whole again, complete in a way she hadn't been since childhood. When the rescue ship arrived, Captain Torres found her sitting peacefully in the meadow, seemingly unharmed by her ordeal. "Rough landing?" he asked as they lifted off. Zara smiled, watching the crystalline world fall away beneath them, but she could still feel its pull, still sense the garden that existed in the spaces between heartbeats. "No," she said quietly. "It was exactly where I needed to be." Months later, back in civilization, Zara discovered that salvaging wasn't enough anymore. She began building instead, creating ships that could touch the edge of possibility, designing drives that ran on imagination as much as fuel. Her competitors called her mad, but her ships flew farther and faster than anyone thought possible. And sometimes, in the deep of space when the stars sang their ancient songs, she would see a familiar figure standing at her shoulder, translucent, but undeniably real. "Hello, Nyx," she would whisper. "Hello, little star," would come the reply. "Ready for another adventure?" And somewhere in a garden between dreams and reality, a book glowed brighter, its story no longer ending in abandonment, but continuing into new chapters of wonder and possibility. The forgotten were remembered, and the dreamer had come home.